Facility Financing Authority Board meeting to order at Thursday, June 5th. And can we start with the roll call, please?
Yeah, so we have Board Chair Matt Hefferker, who I believe is absent, correct? And we have Michelle Templeton, yes. Molly Lugo,
Yes.
Jamie Goldstein,
Yes.
Nicole Colbert,
Here.
and Peter Driscoll here.
Right, are there any additional materials to the agenda?
Nope.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, so next on our agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the community to address the board on any matter included on today's agenda or on any topic not on today's agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Library Facility Financing Authority. Are there any members of the public who would like to address this board? Great.
I just want to clarify, this is an area where we can start asking questions of the board, or is that later?
If you have questions regarding the financing of our facilities, this would be the time to ask or to make those comments.
Yes, I do have a question. My name is Thais Hogarth and I work at the Felton Library branch. And I do have a question in regards to the extended hours being proposed. I'm wondering why the specific branches, Capitola, Felton, and I believe it was Scotts Valley, why those branches in particular were selected to be given extended hours. Does it have something to do with people needing a drink, being a cooling center, people needing to charge of their devices? Why those branches compared to the rest of the system?
Okay, I'm gonna hold that comment or question because that is on our Library Joint Powers Authority agenda as an agenda item related to the budget. And so we'll address that and hold that when we get to that part of the agenda, if that works. Okay, great. Are there any other members of the public? Yeah.
Well, my name is Ken Bear. I'm the president of SEIU 521 for the City of Santa Cruz chapter. I'm here today because there's a growing concern about safety in the public libraries in Santa Cruz. And we would like to encourage you all to take that more seriously and to actually start implementing some policies to actually make it safer for employees in particular in the branch libraries. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Yeah.
Just as a follow-up question to that, in regards to the funding that's being proposed to finance this extended hours of the library. I would like to ask, is there a reason why we're looking at creating new hours rather than reinvesting?
So that's on the agenda later, so we'll talk about it then. You can ask any comments and questions at that time when we get to the budget, which will be, I'll let you know over there. Okay, that's great. Okay, any other public comments? Anyone online?
We're not hybrid.
Oh, we're not
Yeah,
hybrid
no,
today. Okay.
just us.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we'll close public comment and move on to the library director report.
Yes, and for the LFFA meeting, the two big updates are Boulder Creek's awning installation is complete, and as part of their end of school year children's celebration this afternoon, we have the former supervisor groups, possibly Monica, showing up just to acknowledge the new awning. And then both Boulder Creek and La Selva Beach are now chosen. There's a TV show called America by Design on CBS that want to feature them as part of an architecture program. That's the director's report.
That's cool. All right, are there any questions from the board regarding the director's report?
I don't really have a question. Well, I don't have a question for the board, or sort of have a question for the board. On our library, on our solar project in Capitola, we've been, on about a 10 email exchange with PG&E about potential deficiency billing for new service credit. Nobody there seems to be able to answer my questions about it. So if anyone on this board or in the room after the meeting has ever dealt with efficiency credit billing with PG&E, I'd love to hear about your experience. Because I'm getting nowhere.
That's that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, is there any public comment on the library director's report? All right, then we will move on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a board member wants to pull something from consent. So, is there any?
I don't have any questions, but I can move the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have motion by Director Colburn, second by Director Goldstein, and all those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously, and we'll move on to the general business of the LFFA, which we have no general business items. So any project updates and comments by board members?
I'll just note that in addition to Capitola at the Felton branch, we're also exploring the possibility of solar. So we haven't bid that out yet, I don't believe, but that and a generator, we want to make the Felton branch more resilient in times of power outages and disasters. So hopefully that continues to move forward.
Great. Okay, well, the next meeting of this LFFA is going to be September 4th at the Aptos branch. So look forward to seeing everyone there. And with that, we wrap up the Library Facility Financing Authority and we move to the Library Joint Powers Authority board meeting. So grab this agenda. Got it. Okay. Okay, so we are going to call to order the Library Joint Powers Authority board meeting. This is the regular meeting. It's Thursday, June 5th, and can note that all board members continue to be present for this meeting. All right, are there any additional materials?
No.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay. So now we invite the public to comment on any item that's in the purview of the Library Joint Powers Authority Board. We will get to the budget on the regular general business, and so that would be a time that we'll be looking for any comments on the specific budget proposed changes. But if there's anything general public comment that anyone would like to bring up, now would be the time to do it.
Sarah Harbison and staff at the library. I just met a Capitola patron in the parking lot and promised I would share her praise for the Capitola Library staff. She wasn't able to come in, but she asked me, "Is going to the librarian meeting?" And I said, yes. And she said, "Could you please tell them that I think librarians should run the world?" And that she is new to town and has kind of had a difficult time finding her way. And she said the staff here at the Capitola Library has been extraordinarily helpful and kind. And she just wanted you all to know.
I heard the comments in the parking lot as well. I can confirm them.
Oh, okay.
Great. Great. Any other general public comment? Okay, so let's move on to the report by the library director. Dr. Platt.
Yeah, so I've submitted a written report, but I do want to call out a few things from that. And the first one is I want to acknowledge the staff. We've been doing alongside Santa Cruz Pride for their 50th anniversary a lot of programming over the last few months, particularly on Thursdays, and we have programming continuing throughout into July on that. Of course, the book cart team was out on the Pride Parade last weekend. very popular. And then staff suggested we do a Pride library card. So we now have a Pride library card that people can choose from when they're selecting a library card and registering with us, which is really nice. The website migration, which we've already alerted to you is happening, is underway. We are on track to have a kind of a public tester site ready by late July for the public to give feedback on. Yeah, that one, just a lot of staff working on that one, but we are on track with that. The strategic planning process will start later this summer. We're going to do a kickoff meeting in August and a lot of focus groups in October, but some of the background planning has already started, and I've referred Baton Global, who is our strategic planning consultant, to do some stakeholder interviews with the board and with the Library Advisory Commission. So thank you for those of you who can participate in those. And then the last thing from the report that I wanted to call out is we are, and Nicole, you mentioned this in the last session, we are working with the county's Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience to develop an MOU to have Boulder Creek, Felton, Scotts Valley, and Aptos libraries serve as cooling or resiliency centers when they're needed. And this is where they OR3 would bring in their team if they wanted us to stay open past closing hours or open on a day that we're closed, such as a Sunday. And they would basically have access to the meeting room space. They wouldn't have access to the full library, which is why we are comfortable with letting them staff that. So that's at no cost to us. And I believe you do have it on consent in this packet, and I believe it's going to go to the Board of Supervisors at the end of June. So those are the things I want to call out for the director's report.
Good. Are there any questions from the board?
It was interesting that you noted in the report, the areas that the state librarian is pulling back on, and I was just wondering if for the competitive grant programs, if you were hoping to apply for any of those, that now you're not gonna be able to.
We're correct. We're not applying for any this year until we know that the funding is actually going to occur. And that's why he's pulling back from this. You know, the message from the IMLS kind of shifts from week to week to week. And so the state is just being very, very, very careful.
Right.
And I did flag the one thing that I'm really concerned about is California Libraries Learn as a professional development leadership training program for staff that many staff in Santa Cruz Public Libraries have taken advantage of over the last few years. And we've gotten close to $25,000 worth of training out of it for free, basically, or funded by the federal government through the state library. That's in danger of going away. So there are a few things that will affect us.
Okay.
But we don't have any direct federal funding, and we're being very cautious about the grants that we go after.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Just say I appreciate the partnership with OR3, and I know with PG&E as well, at least at the Scotts Valley branch, for a public safety shut off option for them, the resilience centers that they open if they need to. So it's a great use of our facilities. Okay, are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on the library director's report? No? All right, then we will move on to our report by the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sarah Beck, Executive Director of the Friends of Santa Cruz Public Libraries. I'm happy to report on the progress of our capital campaign committee. We've been taking it out to outreach summer. We're happy to have been part of the Pride Parade and the Imprecision group that performed, as well as spending some time at the farmers market yesterday in its new location. We're really enjoying getting out, speaking with the public and answering questions about the downtown library project. So that's going really well. We're getting a great positive reception. We're gonna keep going. We'll be at Juneteenth. We'll be at a number of larger summer programs with the library this summer. We also have our summit, our now annual, because we did it last year, our now annual Friends Summit, which is happening at the Live Oak annex next Wednesday, and we're inviting our staff, board, chapters, chapter leadership, staff from the library. I mean, this is really, our once a year chance to get everyone who's involved in Friends and a very large group of us together. And we're going to be leading into strategic planning, which will align with the library strategic planning this fall. So we're kicking off and we're really looking at our mission work, which is in obviously our areas of fundraising, advocacy, and volunteerism towards supporting the libraries. And we're looking at ways that we can collaborate even better to achieve the goals within those areas. Because if you're familiar with the work of the chapters, they're really focused on grassroots support at the branch level, which is wonderful. We get, equipment and programs and so many things supporting individual branches. We also do systemic library-wide support, like we've been talking about with the literacy fund, which we're very proud to be supporting, and also our general advocacy work. So we're looking at ways to collaborate across all of those areas and get ready for a fantastic strategic plan this fall.
That's great. Any questions from the board? Comments? Thank you for all the work you're doing. It's really great. Any members of the public want to comment on the Friends of the Library report? All right, well, we will move on to do we have anyone from the Library Advisory Commission here to report out? Okay. Okay, so next on our agenda is the consent calendar. So again, all items on the consent calendar will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on each item unless the board member wants to pull an item from consent. So you have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Before we give a motion, I just wanted to know, I provided a library sales tax update and revenue update for the Library Financing Authority, which is the third library JPA. It's very confusing, but good news is that staff has worked on a tentative agreement for the MOE with the City of Santa Cruz and the County Library Fund. And the next step for that is to take the Fifth Amendment to each of our city councils and the Board of Supervisors for approval. So we will be doing that probably with all of your last meetings in June to get that done. But it's really good. It brings in additional resources to the Santa Cruz Public Library system. And we will continue to work, bring up the City of Santa Cruz's contribution so that it's more on par with the County Library Fund, which I realize grows at an exponential rate, but all very good news. And I believe it's a 7-year agreement, right,
Yeah,
Jamie?
it's a 7-year
So
agreement.
it provides stability. It provides stability to the library system, and we don't have to be at this for a number of years. It's great. Yeah. But with that, I'll move approval of the consent agenda. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries, and we'll move on to general business. So our first item on the general business part of the agenda is the child protection policy.
And that's on page 74 of your packet. If you're looking for it, it is a new policy for the library. It's driven by insurance requirements, basically. Insurance is tightening up. And just to reiterate for everyone in the room, we pay our own liability insurance. We're not covered under the self-insurance of the city or the county. So we were directed by risk management, who coordinates our insurance, to develop this policy. There are a number of other libraries around the country that have similar policies. So some of the language in here is based on their policies. This policy has been written and reviewed, probably the most of any policy since I've been here. We have a policy review team on staff, children's librarians, legal, risk management. It's gone to the unions, human resources. And it's been through the Library Advisory Commission twice based on their feedback. And now with the approval of it today, what will happen after this is we will develop the training and the forms that go alongside this policy, and they will be rolled out in June, July, and August so that all staff are touched, and the volunteers that will also need to take this training. training, because any volunteers who work with youth will need to abide by these rules. The other things I just want to say about this policy, public library staff around the country are typically not mandatory reporters when it comes to child abuse and child safety. We're always just this side of the fence. And part of the reason for that is that we don't take custody regularly of children. We're not like a Boys and Girls Club or a Parks and Rec where you sign up and you're doing your program over the summer and they take custody of the child during the course of the program. We don't do that, which is part of the reason why we require an adult or a guardian to be with children in the libraries under a certain age. This keeps us on that side of the fence, but it does require a process. Should staff interpret that they've seen child abuse, it creates a process where they report it. And then we report it to the authorities. And it will probably happen rarely, we would hope. So this is one that we will refresh the training on every 2 years. For those things, because if these things happen and you don't quite know what's going on, you kind of need to have a recent understanding of what's going on. I won't go into the details of the policy, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
So I was gonna actually ask about the mandated reporter issue and then the training. So it totally makes sense. Like we deal with this all the time in our Parks and Recs department.
Yeah.
And library systems, obviously, storytelling, you know, the parent is present. Are there scenarios where we do take custody? So we really, in almost no case would we have be mandated reporters.
Right, correct. I
Okay,
think if there was a case where we were going to do some very unique
Like summer
program
camp
and
thing or
walk kids
something.
across the street or go somewhere, it would have to come through my office. And we would determine whether that's an exception or not, but that would be even more rare.
and so then you were talking about training, is the intent to provide mandated reporter training anyway, basically, just to let people know what the signs are and how to
Correct.
deal with it? Okay.
Correct,
Okay,
and
that sounds like a good approach.
we're using the state has free mandatory
Yeah.
reporter training, and so our trainer is going through and pulling directly from that training and creating our own bespoke training for this. So that it doesn't cover all those areas that, if you're a mandatory reporter, as you know, there's all sorts of responsibilities that go along with that. So we're pulling those out, so we're not confusing staff or volunteers.
Yeah. Fair, fair. It's like a good solution.
I have a question on the training. So it's required per policy, probably, you'll be setting a policy. And then does that include onboarding of new staff? Will there be additional trainings beyond the 2-year mark?
Absolutely, it'll become part of our regular mandatory training routine alongside, sexual abuse training and there's 2 or 3 others that we do in the city. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so those will all be tracked.
That was one question I had, was that it didn't, or I didn't see it, maybe it's in here, as how frequently staff are training every 2 years or every 1 year?
No, we would do it every 2 years.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. Good. Yeah, you've answered my questions. So, does the public have anyone like to comment on this? Yeah, please.
When was it submitted to SEIU?
May. Through human resources at this management.
Any other comments? All right, we'll bring the discussion back to the board. There's any other final discussion from the board, or we're looking for a motion to approve and file the new child protection policy number 500 as written.
I move approval of the new child protection policy.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you for doing that. It's an important protection to put in place. And our next item on the general calendar is adjusting weekly Friday schedule to open at 11 a.m. at all branches. So Dr. Pratt, you want to explain that?
Sure, so the background on this is the library up until the mid-2010s did this, so that a branch like Capitola could have a branch staff meeting where everyone who's based in this building to get together and talk through issues and or change management issues or all the kinds of management things that need to happen on a team. That has gone away. Primarily, we think with the reopenings after COVID, all the branches went to a very standard opening schedule during the week. A lot of other library systems do this. We used to do this in New York. I've checked around locally, San Francisco and others, Hayward and others in the Bay Area also do this, and it's very valuable. In addition to having an agendized meeting every week on the Friday, it allows other stakeholders to get in front of those teams as a group. So myself or other division heads from the leadership team can go out and meet with branch teams and not have to worry about meeting with the team in the back room and then going out and touching the team that's working the desk or that's shelving books or what have you. It just gives us a chance to connect with them. And the goal is for this is to increase communication among the branch staff and build a more tight-knit teams and more accountability, and then also give them more chances to meet with us on a regular basis in a conversational setting. We would launch this at the beginning of Q2 in October so that we would have a ramp-up time to get there. Friday mornings are the mornings where there's the most staff in a branch, mostly, and the fewest programs. So this gives us a chance to kind of schedule those things out of the way if we wait until October, and we would assess it after 6 and 12 months to ascertain that we're actually getting what we want. And what we would likely do is hand this off to the change management team, which is made up of staff from across the organization at different levels to actually build out the agendas and implementation.
All right, other questions from the board?
I think you kind of answered my question on this, which was, are there other mornings that are lower, but it's not just about the percentage, it's also about programs and staffing, so
Right.
I'm fine with that, I don't need answers to percentages.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, when you look at the usage stats for the Friday morning hours across the system, it's now the heaviest one of those used.
Yeah.
All right, does anyone from the public want to comment on this proposal? Yeah, please.
It's a question for Christopher. So it's what would be the projected start date for the schedule change? And then also what would be the kind of like expected start time for staff meetings?
10 a.m. and October would be the time of year that we're looking, because we want to plan out what the goals and the agendas are and get everyone on board.
Is there any other comments? All right, then I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for any comments from board members.
I just want to say this sounds like kind of surprising. I think I remember when we used to do it and then we went away from it. And I can't remember if it was pre-pandemic or if it was just due to the pandemic, but it sounds like a really needed thing to help build out the teams. The one idea is, consider maybe once a year, once every 6 months, inviting city staff to the jurisdictions, for the branches that are in jurisdictions. I'd
Absolutely.
love to come talk to the staff, bring our rec team, museum team, folks that have more touch points potentially with the library. So
Yeah,
it wouldn't have to be the full agenda, but just,
right. It would give us the opportunity to bring in stakeholder conversations like that, which really could be useful in Capitola, Scotts Valley, and elsewhere.
yeah.
Any other comments? Well, I think this is great. I think the more participation and more open dialogue you can have amongst staff and, we always think we're communicating, we're never communicating enough. And so I think this is a great move. I don't think it will negatively impact the library users more than the value that staff will get from being able to have those dialogues, have that communication, have that opportunity to learn and to discuss things together. So I think it's a great schedule change to accommodate that. So if there's no other questions from board members, there's Do we need a motion on this? I guess we're approving the proposed schedule adjustment. To allow the branches to have a staff meeting every Friday morning. Okay, thank you, Michelle. Move the second from Jamie, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, we'll look forward to hearing how that goes.
We're telling you, I'm really pleased. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we are at the time where we're discussing the budget. So, this item is, to approve the fiscal year 26 library operating budget, and I'm sure Director Platt's gonna walk us through some things, and then we'll look forward to, input from those of you that are here.
Sure. So, this is a fairly complex conversation, so I've tried to lay it out as clearly as possible, and I'll step us through it. The goal, of course, is to approve our budget as we need to do, understanding that there are some options presented. The budget that's presented here in this packet assumes the dollars that came from the sales tax report that you accepted and filed in the consent agenda. So we're working from the fuller amounts expected from the MOE going forward. It also assumes that the options that are presented are baked into that amount. So if you choose to not assume any of these options, or one or two, or what have you, we will adjust the motion at the end to reflect that amount coming out of the budget, if that makes sense. I also just want to say that it does, we mentioned this in the last meeting in May, this reflects a cost increase in some of the utilities, water, electricity, and landscaping. System-wide, but also at the Live Oak Annex, which now has been open for a full year. And then there's some slight cost increases elsewhere. Let's first perhaps actually just go and just confirm for you guys that the budget, if you want to see it, is on page 15 or page 102 of the packet is the spreadsheet version of the budget, and so that's where the dollars sit, and you can see that we've also got some one-time costs there that you're mostly already familiar with. And then in the last conversation around this in May, there was a question of the amount of vacancy adjustment that we account for in personnel lines. On page 109 of the packet is the personnel expenditure balances that we get from finance. And that shows a vacancy adjustment of just over $900,000 factored in for this year, which is a decrease from last year. Now, because I've kind of gone through much of this already in the May meeting, I'm going to go back to the options and step through those. So the first one is option A, and this includes two sub-options. So the board requested that we bring back extended hours proposal to this meeting. And so that's what you have here. And let me step through the extended hours. So last year at this time, we were, the board was making a decision to step back from Sunday hours in this branch, the Capitola branch. And there was a desire to revisit the conversation this time this year, looking at Capitola and potentially Felton or Scotts Valley for Sunday hours. So what we did is we came with a proposal that kind of tries to answer numerous questions around that. It entertains Sunday hours coming back to Capitola. It entertains Sunday hours at Felton Library because Felton is in the San Lorenzo Valley, and we think we would get people who couldn't necessarily get to Scotts Valley as easily or what have you. And then it also entertains, to answer the Scotts Valley question, adding an hour every Monday through Thursday to close at 7 instead of closing at 6 at Scotts Valley. This is on page 81. And then because in the lease for Scotts Valley, there is a tie to the Aptos branch staffing, it would add a similar hour to the Aptos branches Monday through Thursday. So the end result is there would be 4 additional libraries, 50 hours a week. It would not just be the downtown library. All jurisdictions in the JPA would be covered. There's some monies that would come from additional utilities and custodial or what have you, just to keep the branches, especially the 2 Sunday branches. clean that would need some extra cleaning. There is additional staff required out of that. We would need 3 FTE total to bring the staffing up to allow for those additional hours. And it would satisfy the lease requirements between Capitola, Scotts Valley, and those. That there is comparable staffing in hours. That those triggers that are there. So there would be a total new FTE count of 8 for those 3. That is the hours portion of the option. And there's some assumptions on page 82 about like why those locations. I kind of just described those, but let me go into a little detail because that was a question I brought up earlier. They represent not just the LFA jurisdictions, but geographically dispersed around our service area, and then also aligned with major thoroughfares that serve commuters, shoppers, et cetera. And that's really the Scotts Valley and Aptos locations. We would likely get some additional people stopping in between the hours 6 and 7 who might have a really tight squeeze getting in there before 6 p.m., which is our current closing time. There's also some data in there about usage statistics. I mean, it wouldn't be a huge jump in it would really just add another hour of statistics to the day. This of course requires no change to the downtown statistics, so we didn't do a whole update of the downtown presentation, which was done last year. And we also, the change from last year is that we didn't add a librarian into this portion of the options. This is paraprofessionals, and the librarians would have the option, if they have a Sunday afternoon now, to maybe do a program on a Sunday afternoon if they choose to do so. That's the hours for extended hours for the branches. The second portion of this option is outreach. Outreach, we have a bookmobile that goes out 3 to 4 days a week around the county, and it hits every jurisdiction. We also have staff that go out and do outreach visits outside of the bookmobile, such as our jail reach program, which is very successful, or to specific places that can't accommodate a bookmobile, such as the Janish Addiction Treatment Center in Santa Cruz. What we would like to do is get that bookmobile on the road more. So we can utilize it more, not just for locations that need it, hitting populations that can't easily get to a library branch, but also to use it more for those celebratory activities where you often see other libraries doing it. So we could have had it at Pride or going to a summer reading and celebration in a park somewhere, or those kinds of things. We're kind of limited with what we can do there just because of the resources that we have. We do frequently get questions about, can we do more outreach in South County? I know that's come from you as well, Nicole. And so we've had conversations with some of the stakeholders in South County, and we do some outreach now to some of the farm worker housing and what have you. That's catch as catch can. We did have a conversation with Jeff Gaffney at Santa Cruz County Parks about maybe doing regular programming at the Pinto Lake County Park, not the Watsonville version, but the county version, because apparently it has facilities in that park that we could use. It would not be an annex situation. We would not be using buildings, but we could use our outreach to reach those people. What we would do as part of this option is hire a Spanish-speaking outreach librarian so that we are intentionally reaching to this constituency, which we say we want to reach, but we kind of struggle to do so. The goal for this would be also to create some sustainability in this program so that we're not doing what has happened a lot in the last, which is where we've gotten a grant and we've been able to go down and reach South County or San Lorenzo Valley or wherever the grant runs out, and we would like to be able to continue to have some sustainable programming there. So there is some personnel cost from that librarian and increasing an LA2 up to a full-time position. And then some cost just to refresh our bilingual outreach book collection and things like that. And yeah. And I would also just point out a statistic that you should know for outreach. It's not an insignificant service. It actually circulates more books than our La Selva Beach library, and it right tightly behind our Boulder Creek branch. So we are hitting a lot of people who rely on that service to access the library. So those are the two options in option A. Those are ongoing costs. Option B is one-time monies, and you may remember there was a request that we bring back an option to spend out some circulating digital material. So that's on page 84. And this would hit our fund balance to the cost of $250,000, and this would be to purchase additional copies of popular circulating items now that we have long wait times for, and the goal to bring those wait times down by 6 weeks, and then also to add additional breadth of titles to that collection. The circulating digital collection at Santa Cruz Public Library last year accounted for 46% of our circulation. This is a very popular service that we offer, and this would be helpful to help us improve that service, at least for the year, and get us ahead. I'm not going to go into any of the package descriptions on like the streaming video or the Hoopla or the other than to say that those are popular. Sarah Harvison can answer specific questions if you have about those, but it's really that this is an important collection to us. I will also say that this is one area where we have been hit by the state library's budget reduction. The state provides California Library Services Act monies through the state library to public libraries every year, specifically for shared services. And because we are part of the Northern California Digital Library, that is a shared service. And we've in past years gotten like $16,000 a year that we just dump into this. This is where we put that money. This last year and this coming year, we're anticipating getting $5,000. The state is just pulling back for all the obvious reasons that we all already know. So this would alleviate and more that hit. Again, looking at the budget on page 102, this is reflected in a one-time cost purchase down that would be applied to the fund balance at the bottom of the sheet. That's $250,000. So if you take all of these options and you look at the bottom line of the total fund balance, which is a topic of conversation in May, the uncommitted fund balance would be reduced by nearly 3 million or 39% this year. And the total fund balance would be reduced by 25%. So this would help us achieve bringing down the fund balance to a more acceptable level over the next few years. I just stepped you through a lot. And I think I want to pause and let you have reactions and conversation and answer questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I just wanted to, I really appreciate you bringing forward these options. The county, because of the growth in the library fund and because we have new branches, it's been a goal of ours to increase hours and services at the county library fund branches. Because we really want to showcase the branches and facilitate use of them more. And so we're very excited that there might be additional hours and outreach occurring in the county unincorporated area, as well as the cities of Capitola and Scotts Valley. So we're very excited to see these options, and we're supportive of moving them forward. And I would say, I realize it's a challenging time and sales tax revenue is flat. So at least on the outreach side, I view this kind of as a pilot program to see how it works in this first year. And I recognize there are a lot of moving parts here. So to the extent you can collect data on the outreach and how many people you're reaching and what's occurring, I think is really important so that we can show the value of it, so that when you come back to the board and either ask to continue it or whatnot, you have data to back that up. But I think all the options, I believe that we can afford it right now. a lot of what you're using in terms of fund balance, it looks like at least half of that is one time. And only half of that is ongoing, so I think that's really important to know, and one-time use of that reserve and that fund balance is very appropriate, and it has been growing exponentially just with the growth that we've seen and the closures we had during the pandemic, so I'm really glad that we're getting back to a place where we're bringing new things to the library system. I'm not sure I have questions at this point. I'm interested to hear what the other board members have to say.
Try. I was frantically doing a bunch of math. And maybe I can just sort of try to confirm that my math, everything like my understanding is right, just kind of at a baseline where we're at. Nicole had the sales tax update. Your estimate for this current fiscal year distribution to the LJPA was 10.4. So our year-end estimate in this fiscal year is high in this budget right now. That's okay, that's a fund balance impact. There'll be other numbers that will be adjusted.
Right.
Our next year's number is 10.5. Which would reflect like 1.5% growth, right? Or 1%, something like that. And that seems like a decent assumption to me. Looking for someone to sort of nod and.
Yeah, it's pretty flat.
It's pretty
so,
flat,
Yeah,
like it's a really small growth
Yeah.
factor, okay, so
it was
that,
like 0.1% growth that we were seeing.
okay, so so the sales tax number we think is relatively, I mean, it's as good as, it's an estimate, it'll be wrong, but it's as good as we can do right now. And then the 9,655, that's the new MOE number.
Correct.
And I had a panic attack because I thought we had another $1 million, but I forgot about Watsonville.
Yes,
Friends in
you have to
Watsonville.
factor in Watsonville.
Our friends in Watsonville who get some of the money, so. Okay, so then the total number I see here is basically a -1.4.
1.39.
1.39. And that looks to me like that's entirely made up of these one-time?
No,
No,
those one-time things do not add up and equal 1.39.
okay, I was ballparking it and I was guessing that they did, but they don't? Looks like they're a bit
Correct,
more,
right.
actually.
Yeah, the 1.39 is just a shortfall to the operating budget.
Not including their one times.
Not
What you've done in previous years, yeah.
Okay, so the total applied to fund balance would be the 1.39 plus the one-time stuff, which is, I guess now I'm looking at it, that looks like a 1.45.
Yeah, you've got the books, you've got the NATE project, the digital materials, and then the wireless infrastructure replacement and the 1.39. And then that all applies to the total fund balance.
And the page before, Jamie, the last paragraph spells out how
Pretty good with reading,
in page 101 and last paragraph.
yeah. Oh, man, so we're -1.4 in operations even with the new MOE?
Well, this includes all the
The
options.
options.
Oh, that's built in already.
Yeah.
Pull the
it's on
options
the
out.
budget.
The 1.3 decreases by the amount of those options.
Yeah, so
So
that'd be
the-
$500,000.
Half a million, because the ongoing is the 350 and the 160.
Right.
But that also, that 1.3 includes additional one-time costs too. Or is
Does
that
it?
just below?
No, that's the ongoing, the one-time cost is the 250, the additional is the 250 that we just discussed, and that's reflected just above the 1.3 as
Okay,
digital resources.
that's what I initially thought, yeah.
Right.
So
I
we think
think the-
1.4 one-time cost plus another 1.45, then 1.4. The
Right.
paragraph, the paragraph explains it.
And Nicole, you were sort of suggesting that the outreach 160 maybe be thought of more as one time, kind of a pilot.
Yeah, I think we should think we're interested in testing it like a pilot. Obviously, there's a staff that's
There's a
gonna have
staff.
to be added,
So
but
that would have to be handled by attrition on the other end if we
Yeah.
decided to step back. The other thing that, let's just make sure this is part of the conversation too, because we've deferred it to this next fiscal year on page 107. On the budget development expenditure balances, the second line is the financial services line. Santa Cruz Service agreement. So for this year, our agreement covers us to 613,000, but that's gonna increase when you guys decide which scenario to choose next year.
next year we'll also be bringing in, an additional 600,000 or 700,000 in
Yeah,
MOE.
in MOE, right? You guys have tried for that already.
So I'll jump in with the question. So, I know last year we had the presentation from Management Partners about the long-term budget. Have you been able to update any of those forecasts with the new MOE, the sales tax, the Santa Cruz contract, any of those adjustments?
We just got the numbers for the new MOE last week, so we'll do that work next. You'll remember that the forecast had a flaw and an error, so the cliff that they saw is not quite as big of a cliff, and then the new MOE numbers will help also mitigate that, but we do need to do that work as well, especially as the fund balance gets set down to a reserve level, which is the optimal.
That's my concern, I guess, is, we're looking at using 1.4 in fund balance for operations this year, and then it looks like the forecast for next year is over 2 million. And just
We need to
how that impacts the
rectify that.
long-term forecast as we're making decisions about new ongoing costs. Particular.
Right.
But I want to be able to finish up this thought. So if Jamie, you had more, feel free.
No, I had thought with the new MOE, we were gonna be effectively on an operations basis balanced. Well, we're not. That makes sense. But I'm still processing that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so, bear with me because I don't have the breadth of experience
Sure.
that my colleagues here do on this, but. So for the expanded open hours versus the outreach program, I know they're part of one package, but. It seems like the data and statistics on the impact of each of those options would be really important. And I like your concept, Nicole, of having it be a pilot. One of my concerns is for the expanded open hours. You can't really pilot that because then the community sees something is open, and if you pull back, it's a takeaway.
Yeah,
And so ensuring that the expanded open hours that we're choosing now, which is going to be a long-term cost, is in fact statistically supporting our library goers. Because the outreach option is easier to pull away from if it's not having an impact.
and let's be honest, and we drew some of it from the study that was done last year. For Sunday afternoons, we would likely get more families and people who maybe have a harder time coming as a group to the library during the course of the week or on a Saturday. But during the weekdays, we're likely just mostly gonna get those commuters at the tail end of the day. So and it's valuable to them. But if we were to look at the communities that stand to benefit the most from public library service, we're looking at lower income communities or people who work really long hours. That we would be looking at, this showed in last year's report as well, downtown, Branson 40, partially Live Oak, those would be the locations that would have that kind of impact. And
Right.
the outreach portion of this option is an attempt to reflect that kind of impact, and an increase.
So then along those lines, I also recognize that having closed branches during the pandemic makes it such that we don't really have data to say these were the times that people came most. It's kind of starting at a baseline.
Yeah.
So I recognize the desire to know whether those hours would benefit the community in substantive and meaningful ways. But again, I just have this concern about putting in the largest cost in all of these options is one that will be really hard to pull back from the community on if we're finding that it's not as impactful as we had hoped. Or that the equity piece isn't addressed in, you know, how we're adding budgetary items to our expenditures year over year. I love a pilot, and I'm very supportive of the bookmobile expansion and the equity expansion piece across the entire county without my city hat on. So I guess those are just thoughts. Specific questions would be, you know, we don't really have the data to show those hours and why we're choosing the locations, right? This is just kind of a creating parity across the libraries
We-
of
A little bit
hours.
on 82.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of data in the sense that we looked at like the closing hours
Right.
currently, and we looked at Sunday hours previously, and the Sunday hours again, and I made some assumptions.
right.
But those assumptions would have to prove out, and then the locations were basically to start. Yeah, well, an initial question was, can we reopen Capitola and maybe Belton or Scotts Valley, which is what you asked last year, and so. It was an attempt to answer that question, but then also that brings up those triggers from the lease agreements.
Yeah,
And that's how we involve Aptos. So,
yeah, so I guess mine is really just a cost benefit, and then out of the option A and into option B. You know, just, am I correct in reading that 46% of our circulation comes from that digital asset?
and will likely grow.
So that's a big percentage, it's a big statistic, and is this is a one-time cost?
This is a one-time cost. So we do, I don't have the dollar figure on the top of my head of what we spend on those collections today out of our total materials budget. So it would have a big impact, probably for about 18 months. If we didn't repeat this, we might choose to repeat this if we still have one time coming. But I will also point out, this is a constituency we pointed out to our strategic consultants. Because this is 46% of our use that they're not necessarily coming in our door. Who are these people? Are we serving them the right way? Are we reaching them the right way? How should we be growing?
So I guess I'll remind members of the board, and Michelle, I guess you weren't here last year. We had a long discussion last year about the Sunday hours in downtown. And we put in $177,000 into last year's budget for Sunday hours downtown. And staff did a great analysis showing sort of like the pros and cons of putting those hours in there versus like geographically dividing them between the county. Like if you pick the Capitola or Scotts Valley, do you serve more people closer to them? Who do you serve? And so we ended up making the decision to put the 177 into Sunday hours in downtown, understanding that that wasn't sort of a permanent thing and that the goal was to get to more geographically distributed expanded hours. So I mean, I think we can think in some ways about the 350 as really 350 plus 177, and that sort of expanded hours system wide. So I guess I just wanted to put that in context that it was, you know, the decision was made to add those Sunday hours last year in the budget, and we didn't have enough at that point to do more everywhere. And so, yeah, so, yeah, so this kind of creates the parity. So I think if we were to say, okay, well, we wouldn't do the 350, I think then we should also look at the 177. So my suggestion would be kind of think of those as kind of part and parcel in some ways. And I guess I will also note, you know, we had Sunday hours in Capitola, we've pulled them back. We've had Sunday hours, other branches, we've pulled them back. So it is something we've flexed before. You know, it's never fun to cut services, obviously, but it is something that we have adjusted. I don't even know, 5 or 6 times since I've been on the board, so it's not an impossibility. As long as you're maintaining reasonable hours, some level of. And then, Nicole, I was just trying to pull up the number. I thought that next year's number in the draft MOE agreement was almost a $900,000 increase. You were saying,
For the MOE,
yeah, you were saying 7, is that?
It's 7 this year, and it was 1 something next year, right?
which number are you referring to?
I know.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the increase in MOE contributions between the city of Santa Cruz and the LFA.
Just showing it flat.
Yes.
So, yeah, so the county library fund is putting in an additional almost 7.8 million. But when you bring in the Santa Cruz contribution of 2.8, it's the 965. And actually, there's a small error in here, I just noticed
Okay.
in the calculation, so it should be 9653267, and I can send here the spreadsheet, it was picking up a year.
Okay.
But the number in the LFA memo that I sent out identifies what SCPL will receive, it's the 9653267. If we could just note that, but it's the combination of the city of Santa Cruz and the county library funds.
That's on page 73 if you want to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, I was actually, but I was focused on next year, the 27 amount, the increase.
yeah, they're getting an additional $1 million in 2027.
Okay, that's what cause I thought I heard you
Yeah, 'cause
say
it's
700, and I was thinking it was $1 million.
It's a lot because it's both the phase-in and the 3.5% increase.
Right, that was my memory.
So there's gonna be, so that in theory will cover some of the administrative services cost increase plus other cost increases.
But the problem though is that for the 27 budget, even throwing another $1 million in there, we're still 1.2 underwater,
And that doesn't include the increase.
1.5 underwater.
But are you considering the one-time things?
No.
Or just the ongoing,
Just the ongoing.
just the ongoing?
Yeah,
Yeah, are we ready for public comment? Any other comments?
I just wanted to, and thank you, Jamie, for that. I think I'm not, definitely not proposing pulling back on any of those options, just that, as with the pilot on the outreach program, being aware that this is an opportunity for us to, if we expand hours, to then get data over time to see what fits best across and then work on that parity geographically.
And to that point, Michelle, thank you for bringing that up. Historically, and Jamie and Nicole would know this, there was a variety of hours across the system at different locations that kind of met the community needs. And I really think it was the recession and then the renovations and then COVID, and we just came as easily out of it as possible with 10 to 6 across the board. And I think longer term, it is worth looking at the hour structure as a whole.
I'll just, I don't know if we want to go to public comment, but I also know the library fund has even more resources than what we're bringing into the system, so we are really wanting to get more service at the county library fund branches, so that is our whole goal, because there's so much money being generated by property taxes. So we're trying to remain with parity with the city of Santa Cruz, but because there's been a disparity there just based on what we can buy and wanting to put that in. So I just want to keep that in mind.
Okay, well, let's open this to public comment. We'd love to hear from you on this topic, and we usually limit public comment to 3 minutes. I don't know if we're checking a clock. I didn't mention that earlier, but in case you have a lot of comments, we try to keep it brief.
Hi, I'm Diane Cowan. I'm a librarian here at the Capitola branch. And so from a staff perspective, I really feel like the additional outreach personnel is really where the priority should be. I think it's more in alignment with our strategic goals. And it's going to help us better reach people who are the most vulnerable in our community and who have great difficulty reaching the library. When it comes to adding staff for Sunday hours, or extending the hours, I would like to see the priority be essentially, that one evening hour everywhere instead of opening on Sundays, anywhere else. I can tell I can tell you from my experience that as the staffing levels are now, if we've got a situation where somebody's on vacation and then somebody gets sick at a branch, it's like a mini crisis every time, getting people from other branches to come and and it's just, it can become daunting and just kind of a little, just agitating doing that all of the time. So I see additional staff as maybe alleviating that discomfort. And not, I feel like it would be a challenge to have additional hours, in so many places. So, and I would also, I didn't intend to say this, but I would like, to see when the lease agreements are up. I think that some of these, triggers that force certain branches to have staffing relative to another branch baked into a lease agreement is kind of the most absurd thing I've ever heard. So I'd like to see those come out of those lease agreements so that those things can be, handled using data and evidence instead of just like, oh, you got hours, I have to have hours.
Others who'd like to speak? Yeah.
In regards to adding extra hours to the Felton branch, like Christopher said, that would give our librarian more time to do programming on Sundays. However, I would say from a staff perspective, our current Felton librarian is already stretched thinly as it is, all the programs we do. So if that funding would be applied to extended hours of the Felton library, I would also ask them maybe consider adding another Felton librarian to the personnel, just to alleviate that stressor on our single librarian. And another comment I had was on the outreach, specifically because downtown, we have a lot of utilization downtown. And I think a couple of the outreach programs may be involving social workers with the downtown branch in the city. Because I think especially now, as we're moving forward and there's a lot of instability within the housing community and just with other things in general. Libraries in the county have been used as kind of an unofficial day center. And I think that some funding to provide more social services or for us to work hand in hand with social workers would be very beneficial. Even if it would be a pilot program at a singular branch to test for efficacy.
Thank you.
I would like to second what Diane said about increasing hours during the day as opposed to adding Sundays. That way we don't run the risk of what you're talking about adding Sundays and then taking it away. And also as far as like adding staff hours, granted, I have a personal vested interest in what I'm about to say, but I believe the priority should be upgrading current part-time public-facing employees and adding hours there first before looking at adding additional staff. I think that we should have more 40-hour and 30-hour staff just for the sake of like staff retention and whatnot. Yeah, I believe that should be the priority.
Any other public comment?
I'll second Diane's thoughts and then just add about the outreach, increase. Just serving people who are in need and also people who aren't using libraries. Like we talk a lot about making the buildings available for people so that they can come more often, but there are a lot of people in our county who aren't aware that there are libraries, and that's who the bookmobile and outreach programs really serve, and a lot of Spanish speakers. And I come from a long time working at Watsonville Public Library, And I see the differences in how SCPL isn't able to reach Spanish speakers as effectively as we were at Watsonville Public. And I'd really like to see outreach services be part of that and get more Spanish speakers using our libraries and aware that there are branches to come to through outreach.
I also just wanted to, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but although it sounds like we'll be having increased in MOE funds, there's still just in general, 2026 and 2027 are forecast to be years of economic decline and rising retirement costs. So that is a concern that I also have.
I do have a final comment, in regards to staff retention and support. Thank you for all the work you've been doing in terms of serving the community and keeping the community in mind. But, staff members are also members of the community being supported by the library. And if you look at current incident reports, which have been increasing over the past few years, many staff members do not feel like we are being provided the sufficient support in regards to maybe more security downtown, and that light. I'm not sure what a solution to that would be, but I would like to bring it to the board's attention because many staff do not feel like their concerns or their safety is being taken seriously. In fact, many feel that their safety is being sacrificed for the overall public service, and a burnt out staff member can't serve the public effectively.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna bring it back to the board, close public comment. More comments from board members.
I would like to, just for clarity, I think it's important to note for the hours that are in the leases. We won't be able to change all of those even when they expire because they relate to redevelopment successor agency agreements. So they're long-standing agreements between the various jurisdictions that unfortunately we all have to deal with, even though we didn't land on those. And for the city of Capitola lease, it's a 99-year agreement, and they were very insistent on this. So unfortunately, I think we have very limited leeway in adjusting that. It's very complicated, and I recognize it creates challenges for the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. So I want to acknowledge that, but I just want you all to know that there are some limitations. Even if we chose a different course here, we might be limited from changing that course. So
Yeah.
that was one thing I wanted to know.
I will just also note, I think that agreement was entered into in like 2000 between the county and the city of Capitola. And so that contract was entered into 25, 30 years ago that said, we build the facility, staffing will be the same as Aptos. So that's an old contract. It's not just in the lease. I think the Scotts Valley situation is almost the same.
It's the same, yeah,
Yeah.
it was related to the redevelopment and the funding that was set aside. And then I also want to note with regard to Sunday hours, I know that I hear the need to maybe look at weekday hours versus Sunday. The county was very interested in Sunday hours in particular because a lot of people have difficulty, myself included. I work very long hours. The only chance I get to go with my kids, if we're gonna go to the library, is on the weekend. So I can't even get to a library at 7 p.m. They can go after school because they go to Scotts Valley Middle, they can walk there, whatnot. So if I'm gonna go, I can only go on the weekends. And so I think there's a lot of that in the community. We have a lot of people who commute to the Bay Area or other places, and weekends are the only chance to go to the library. So I also view this, I'm willing to adjust it in the future. If for some reason we're not seeing a lot of activity on Sunday, that's where the data comes into play. Maybe we want to shift that to weekdays, but it would be good to test it out and see what happens and then maybe adjust in the future.
Yeah, and I think that was my point, is that we can't know what those needs are until we open and see.
Yeah.
And so this option provides both that audience that you're talking about and the outreach piece. And so I think, it's an opportunity to see how we're serving diverse sets of community members and get statistics over the years.
So although it's funny because we've been looking forward to this MOE update for a long time and realizing it was gonna bring more resources to the library. And to see that we're still doing that, we still are ending up on an operating basis with a deficit. It was disheartening. That was like a gut punch. I was so excited when we were talking about it at the outset that we had a 7-year agreement, and then I'm seeing this, it's like, oh no. So I guess number one is when, I'm fine doing this. We have a really healthy fund balance. We need to use the resources. We need to provide the services. Getting out there, we agreed to provide extra services on Sunday in only Santa Cruz, kind of grudgingly, knowing that the library fund was actually putting a lot more money into the system and had more money. So it felt kind of weird last year, but I think giving this a shot and seeing how the usage is, monitoring the data, and then we can look at it again. I think for the budget team, looking at 27 and really trying to find a way now that we know what the MOE is gonna be, and it's not just some imaginary thing, it's like we know what the 7-year schedule looks like, is figure out how do we get to a balanced budget. And I'm fine burning, I'd like to continue to burn down the fund balance to get us to a reasonable level, so we're protected in a recession, so that we don't have to immediately resort to really draconian things. I've lived through, I've managed through the Great Recession and how traumatic that was, and I think having resources that are there to protect the institution is important. I also don't think that we need $11 million. So, I think getting ourselves to a reasonable level of reserve, burning that down, and then figuring out how we get to match up with our money in, money out for the staff, for the resources the community needs in the long term is really kind of a critical goal. So with that, I'm prepared to move forward. I'm prepared to move forward with the increased hours, with the increased outreach, the 250 for more digital services. I really appreciate the comments staff made, and I think looking at opportunities to bring hourly folks, I saw you nodding while that comment was made, bring hourly folks up from maybe 25 hours to 40, if that's what they want, to try to help with retention. I think that's great. And, I'll leave it to you to figure out how to best implement that.
And part of the hours is to bring a few positions up, just as part of this proposal, and then having a long-term plan. That's a good idea too, because that's always better for retention, especially in Santa Cruz County.
Yeah.
That was a question I had with the new FTEs that would be needed. Those aren't necessarily new people. Those could be existing people's hours being expanded
Yes.
for the total
Yes,
overall. Okay.
there will be some new
Yeah.
people. So if 2 years out, the data shows something different, we would need to attrit rather than just snap back.
Right. All right. Any other comments? Board members? I'll just say that, I'm concerned about the ongoing operating deficit. And so my initial thought was, is this really the time to be committing to ongoing expenses and increasing that? But I also have a lot of respect for Nicole and Jamie, who've been in this a lot longer than I have and have a lot deeper understanding of the long-term context of this. And so it was very interesting to hear that evening hours might be even more important than weekend, because I would have thought, oh, well, maybe we just shouldn't expand that by an hour. Is that really going to reach that many people? But it was really interesting to hear from staff who are the ones who are actually interacting with the community on that. So I think I'm comfortable with moving forward. Just really interested in the data that would come out of this and being able to continue to sort of adjust and monitor so that we're not staffing empty libraries,
Right.
but that we're, making sure we're meeting the community with the needs of what they're trying to access. So, any other?
I have one more question. When
Sure.
do you think that the additional hours would be effective. So I'm just wondering if we want a report back at some point in the new fiscal year
You will.
regarding this, just to
Yeah.
keep monitoring it.
So we anticipated a runway here because we would need to recruit and then prepare staff and everyone else. So we were anticipating a Q2 start, so October is what we're aiming for. Some of that will depend on recruitment. And then absolutely, there'll be a buildup, staff, public have to discover this, we have to promote it, yada, yada, yada. So at the end of the next fiscal year, we can certainly report as it's going on. You'll see the data for the visits and what have you that already comes into the board packets, but at the end of this time next year, we should be reporting out.
So you'll probably have some sort of recommendation as part of the next proposed budget on whether to continue or modify or
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
All right, we're ready for a motion?
I'll move approval of the fiscal year 26 library operating budget, including option A1 and A2, and the additional, that's the extended hours and then the increased outreach services. And include the 250 for digital materials. And then also ask for the report back, kind of on sort of metrics and see how we're doing as we get to a point where we really feel like we really have the data. And then for next year's budget, kind of pre-direction, let's really look at what it would take now that we know what the MOE is gonna be, what it would take to get balance by 28, say, for example. And present some options of what that would look like if we can then achieve one.
Mhm.
That's my motion.
Got that, Tiffany?
That was.
I just have a friendly amendment for the library to
Sure.
correct the MOE number. I sent it to Kira already, so it shouldn't be hard to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But I can second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of adopting the budget, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you for all your input. Thank you to staff for all your work on this. We know we're all staff, so we know how much work it goes into putting together a budget every year. So really appreciate all of your hard work on that. So next we'll move on to comments by board members. Any comments? All right, well, our next scheduled meeting is September 4th at the Aptos branch, 9 a.m. Look forward to seeing everyone there. Have a great summer.
November 4th. Nice. I was just the August meeting.
Read some books over the summer.